But we see the same thing in the boxes in places like the Serapeum, which is probably my favorite site because there's literally miles of tunnels beneath Saqqara. So it's like a giant underground necropolis as well as having stuff on top, pyramids.
Is that that step pyramid in Saqqara where like you go into the middle of it and you look down and it's just this giant pit with crazy. A massive granite box at the bottom of it? Yeah,
it's one of my. In fact, they just opened this up for tourism. And actually, a really good thing is that the Egyptian authorities are opening up more things. They seem to be understanding that like people are interested in the mystery and they want to see stuff. So thankfully they just did a good job renovating it and opened it up for tourism. But yeah, so that you have this step pyramid structure, allegedly the proto-pyramid, I think was actually built by the dynastic Egyptians. But it's built over a massive pit in the ground. It's probably 100 feet deep, about 45 or so feet wide, square. And you look down onto this thing and there's at the bottom, there's a massive multi-piece granite box that's made up of like 32 pieces of granite weighing anywhere up to about 5 or 6 tons each. I think that box and that pit were likely there and that the Egyptians constructed that step pyramid over the top of it. Imhotep designed it. And I think that was then claimed and used as a burial site for Djoser, the pharaoh.
What is this box right here?
This box?
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite boxes at the Serapeum. So this is in, so the Serapeum is at Saqqara. It's a series of underground galleries, beautiful gallery, like these tunnels you could drive a Volkswagen down. They're huge and straight. And one of them goes for only 200 meters. And inside the Serapeum, you have 25 of these things, which are these single piece, like 100-ton granite boxes. They're insane. It's absolutely insane. And this one in particular is in an off-limits area that we went into that's rarely seen by tourists. It may be the biggest one there. It's made out of like a black granite, or it might even be granodiorite. It's not, we don't know exactly where the quarry for this thing was. That's its lid sitting on top. And it actually isn't finished. It developed a crack at the end, and it was for some reason just shelved there. They decided, well, we'll just tuck this thing away in a corner in this underground structure and leave it there because it was never quite finished.
That thing weighs 100 tons?
With the lid, yeah. So the box itself might be about 70 and the lid's probably 30 tons. And the lid's been pushed back and it's insane. And there's 25 of them. And here's the thing, like we've never made anything like this in our civilization. Not saying we couldn't, but an interesting experiment. Chris Dunn went to like a granite processing company and said, hey, what would it cost? How could you make us one of these boxes? And they're like, well, for starters, the lump of granite's going to be a ton amount of money. And then it's like, we couldn't make the box without developing specific tools to do it, because the way they'd make it is they'd cut like 5 slabs and then bolt them together, like a floor and then 4 walls, and they'd bolt it together into a box. These are single pieces. So what's impressive about that is it's like you have to quarry this one block of stone and then dig it out. You have to dig all of the inside out. And some of the examples of precision in the Serapeum are absolutely remarkable. You have perfect 90-degree corners in some of the boxes, perfect 90-degree interfaces with the lids, and some of these walls maintain that geometry from like being 11 feet apart. Like that's insane. Like that's one of the major challenges of this is in designing and maintaining that type of relative geometry in a space where you can't afford to make any mistakes. So as you cut down, if you cut something wrong, like you're done. You can't change that whole inside shape, but they've managed to keep these incredibly precise, and you get right down to these little trilinear corners in the bottom corners, and then the walls on it are all polished like mirrors. And there's 25 of them. Now, they're not all finished. So what's even more remarkable about the Serapeum is it seems like a lot of this work was being done in situ. Like the boxes were being worked on in situ.
What do you mean in situ?
In situation. So they were. There's evidence of multiple steps of work. So that big black box we looked at. This is for example is a collection of the boxes. The lighting's not the best in the Serapeum. You kind of have to see it to understand it. But yeah, these are and they're all housed in offset alcoves from these tunnels. They sit down about 6 or 7 feet. Like the alcoves are sitting down about 6 or 7 feet. So
yeah, it's like kind of like a horse stable. Right? They're all in their own little stables.
Yep. And they're all offset. That's a strange thing. There's no 2 alcoves that line up and look at each other. So you got multiple challenges when it comes to the Serapeum. One of them is, first and foremost, the logistics of moving that stuff in there. Like the roof hasn't been constructed, right? So it's not like if you were doing this from a a functional perspective, or the easiest way to do it would be that you'd dig the hole in the ground, you'd lower the boxes down in there, and then you'd build the roof and everything over the top of it. That's not what's going on in the Serapeum. These are tunnels that are dug into the bedrock. So the boxes had to be moved in through the front door, maneuvered through all these tunnel systems, and then placed and lowered down into these alcoves. And again, you're looking at blocks of stone that are up to 100 tons, maybe more if they haven't fully been hollowed out and finished. And one of the crazy thing is the biggest boxes in here, you're talking about a foot of clearance difference in the width of the box to the width of the tunnels. So you have 1 foot. It's like I like to use that's the Friends episode where they're trying to move a couch up a staircase, like pivot. Imagine trying to move a 100-ton object in that tight space into an alcove like that. And again, we don't know how they lit it. We don't know how it's pitch. I've been down there when they turn the lights on. It's pitch black. You just go inside a little way and it's pitch black.
You can't light a flame in there?
Well, there's no evidence for that. We see in a lot of temples where they've used fire and flame, and you have that exhaust. You have the soot marks everywhere. There's no evidence for that in the Serapeum.
Really?
Yep. We don't know how they lit it. There's no evidence for heavy use of flame. And then we don't know how they moved it, because the calculation to move you need at least 150 people to move, say, a 50-ton box. That means,
look at that fucking thing.
Yeah, it's insane. So if you assume one person can pull 200 kilograms, which is 440 pounds, then you need 150 people to pull a 50-ton load. So you're trying to cram 150 people into these tunnels. It just doesn't make it. It's impossible. So, the Egyptians weren't known to use pulleys or levers or capstans or any of that stuff. I think those things were used later on to push the lids off. I think there was the Romans and other people that came in there and found these sealed boxes were probably like,
what's in them?
What's in them? Yeah, what's in them? And so all of them except for one had their lids pushed off when Auguste Mariette found it. I think it was like 1850 something.
What did they put in them?
We don't know. So, there's an explanation for it in the mainstream world, is that there were sarcophaguses for Apis bulls. So there was a sacred bull called the Apis bull, and they say that these were boxes for Apis bulls. They would mummify these bulls and put them in there. Now, all of the boxes were found empty when Auguste Mariette rediscovered the site in like 1850 something, thereabouts, except for one box that had its lid still intact. He couldn't move the lid, so he blew it up. He blew it open with dynamite, which was unfortunately a technique that was probably used a little too often in the early days, until guys like Flinders Petrie came along and sort of tutted them away from doing that. And he found it was completely empty. There's nothing in it. So we've never found so there's another set of tunnels nearby called the Lesser Galleries, and in those galleries they're like really primitive tunnels compared to the Serapeum, and in those galleries they found wooden boxes with Apis bulls mummified in them.
Oh, really?
So because they found a wooden box in a nearby set of galleries that isn't connected to the Serapeum, they therefore spread that excuse across all of this and go, no, you know what? It's all ceremonial. It's all Apis bulls, which is, it becomes a bit of a meme after a time, because every single thing is ceremonial or, some sort of representational. There's nothing functional. I mean, the mainstream story of history, everything's ceremonial, like everything. And I think it's nonsense. I think there is a functional purpose for some of these sites. Now, I don't know what that is, and maybe our technology hasn't gotten there yet, because this comes back to my perspective on technology.
The giant fucking pyramid. How would you do that just because for a fucking ceremony to bury dead people? Mm-hmm. It seems bizarre to think that.
Well, you could maybe explain it with ego. Like you might have a king that's egocentric to do it, but there is something. I'm convinced there's something going on with underground boxes. Now it's either boxes in precision boxes in pyramids, or in underground in the Serapeum. We see them at Abu Sir. They're all over the place. We see these. There's a real trend of these giant single piece sort of precision carved granite boxes or very hard stone boxes in underground locations or in places like pyramids. Now, there's a lot more that suggests some form of functionality was on these sites as well. One of the things that I was fascinated by that you see it at Giza, it's at the pyramids, mm-hmm. it's at Saqqara, it was at Dashur, is that there's signs of infrastructure. That there's literally a channeled block infrastructure beneath the floor tiling. So we know this because the floors are all, the sites have been destroyed and we see it. So you have these U-shaped blocks of sometimes like white calcite or even granite, like these sort of expensive and hard to obtain material with these channels in them that run underneath the floor tile. So you're talking like a 2 or 3 foot thick floor tile of basalt or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Beneath that layer, there's a whole infrastructure of like piping basically that runs beneath these sites, and you see Y joins, you can trace it at Abusir in particular. Like this stuff goes everywhere. But we also see it at Giza, at Dashur, at Saqqara. So there was something going on with that. Like that was a functional thing. It wasn't on display. There wasn't a ceremonial purpose for it. It's an expensive type of stone. They must have had a reason for using it. And it's running underneath these sites. And it's like nobody's really willing to explore that idea that was this a processing site of some sort? Was there some function going on?